So let's discuss again what lead loyalty is. When a consumer submits a request for a Jeep Wrangler, do they ultimately buy that Wrangler? Do they ultimately buy a Jeep? Or do they defect to another brand? Maybe they're looking for a new car and ultimately they burn gas in a used car. Google reminds us that we've got to be very cautious not to take the vehicle that the consumer submitted to literally. Google tells us that 71% of consumers haven't fully decided at the beginning of their journey. For younger buyers, 9 out of 10 consumers ultimately defect, because for a lot of them, this is their first car that they're going to buy. Even your luxury car buyers, Google will tell you that 69% of those consumers aren't quite sure of the vehicle that they're ultimately going to buy when they first start their journey. Nearly 3 out of 4 consumers remain open to influence, and again, it's very important to understand that. As a heck of a lot of consumers ultimately buy a vehicle, again, they need more help than ever with 360 make-model combinations out there today to choose from. So let's look at an example from Google, the exact path a consumer went down prior to making their purchase. They started off online on Google, looking at a Toyota. Their second vehicle that they looked at was indeed a Jeep, but the list goes on and on. From there, they looked at a Mazda. They dreamt for a little bit and looked at a Ferrari, Subaru. They put in Toyota FJ Cruiser MPG. They then looked at Chevy dealers in Miami. They listed SUVs by gas mileage. Ultimately, this consumer Googled Jeep dealers South Florida, even spelt Florida wrong, but ultimately bought a vehicle, a Jeep in South Florida. So in wrapping up, Google reminds us that a consumer is on average looking at 4 vehicles in the beginning of their journey. 48%, almost the majority of the consumers will ultimately buy something other than they started out on their journey, other than something they originally intended for a make and model. Many times, of course, they're not going to buy the trim, but even coming down to the make model, a lot of folks are defecting, whether it be make, model, new or used. Google also reminds us that 65% of these consumers will ultimately switch brands than what was last in the garage. 25% will stay loyal, but 10% of the consumers buying today are first-time buyers.